Now I have some artwork on the side here, and all but one of them has the value sketch that I worked on before I did the final painting. I think very highly of doing work ahead of time for your pieces. Someone asked me a few minutes ago, what am I painting today? And I had to think, because it's been living in my head for about 4 days, 3 or 4 days, and whether I'm thinking about it or not, my brain is subconsciously working on it. So ahead of time, I do little sketches, little thumbnails, and then I do a value sketch. But first what I do is I do find my subject matter, and this is 2 different photographs that I put together. Sometimes I change the people that are in it. You'll notice that the people that are in this photo here, I've changed their positions in the my sketch. Now, can you see my sketch on there? Okay. So what I do is I piece it together best that I wanted, and then I work on my sketch first on the final, the finished paper. Okay, so now I have my parameters, I have my shape, my size, so then I can scale it down proportionately to do the hard work. And that's not the painting part. That's the easy part that comes later. I do my sketch, I get my composition all worked out, and then I do my value sketches, okay? So this is, I can see, okay. Let me know if you can see this. This is the first
Let me zoom in a little bit.
Okay. And I'll pass these around also so everybody can see them. And they're numbered 1 through 4. You can do as many value stages during the value sketch as you want, or as few, until you get exactly what you want. Because believe me, if this doesn't work, your final painting's not going to work. And I mean, how many of you have been working on a painting and you get to a certain stage and go, I ruined it. It's not working. It's going to go in the drawer and nobody's ever going to see it. So I start out with my value sketch and I work out all my problems with this. I can scrub out, I can change, I can throw it away and start over again. I'm using not expensive paper, so it's much easier to change and fix. So this was my first one, and then I build up the values as I go. See, it doesn't look like much, it's just different shapes. Building up the shapes, and then I get to this stage, building up more darks. I get darker with each stage, and then I get to this stage. And it's actually looking like something, and it has a nice shape, nice form. My eye seems to move through it pretty well, so this is what I'm working on. Now you'll notice that there's spaces where I put little W's, and I tell all my students, I said that's what I do. I mark a W where I want to keep it white because I will forget if I don't mark it. So pass these around, okay? Oops.
Oh. Where is this?
This is the Washington Square Park Arch, right at the end of 5th Avenue, in Manhattan.
And Marianne, 2 questions. What kind of paper do you prefer, and do I see masking?
Yes, you see masking. This is wow, Fabriano, thank you. It just flew out of my head, having one of those senior moments. Fabriano Artistico, 140 pound, and you'll notice that I'm using a block. I kind of prefer to use a block because it keeps the paper flatter. And it's a little easier to work with. Now, because I have some nice, it's late in the afternoon, it's maybe about 3 o'clock, and the way the angle of the light this time of year hits the people, you're getting a crust of light hitting them in certain places, like here and here, that seems very important to my vision. So I wanted to make sure, because they're so tiny, I wanted to make sure that they keep white. And outside of going back in later and adding white paint, this is the only way to keep something pristine and white that's a tiny, tiny piece. So I did put some masking here. So there's a few pieces of it in tiny places. Larger places of white, I will just not paint. So, okay. So now I worked out my value sketch, and it's been living in my head for a few days. And I've been working on it, thinking about what kind of colors I want to use, what kind of combinations. And I have my favorites. So I'm going to kind of go with them to begin with.
And what kind of paint do you use?
It is a combination of different paints I use. All of the paints but one on my palette are more transparent nature than, say, cadmiums. I have one cadmium on my palette, and that's cadmium lemon. I don't use it too often. I don't like the chalkiness of it. So I kind of try to stay with the more transparent colors that layer and play nicely with each other. So I'm on dry paper, and I'm just going to wet the arch, plain water. And I've decided I'm going to make this white, and this white. So that's all the sky.
Keep going.
Okay.
Nope, not that.
Okay, I'm just wetting in the arch and some places that I don't want white. And I mixed up some ultramarine blue, which is a Winsor Newton color, and burnt sienna. And we're going to put this on here. Changing the mix throughout, not staying the same for the whole thing. Makes it much more interesting when you skew the balance of the colors. And I know some of my students are saying right now, why are you using such a small brush?
So,
I should use a bigger brush for this, but that one got left home because I was using it. So I'm adding this and skewing the color, add some blue in there, and I'm painting through some areas, not worrying about them, because they're going to be darker later on, okay? So that's done. I've got some different colors moving around in there. And let's take the same ultramarine blue and add some quinacridone gold. And just add some color here. Still wet, let the colors bleed together.
Is that hot press paper?
This is cold press. I always use cold press. I shouldn't say always. Most of the time in my finished paintings, I use cold press. I've been playing with other types of paper for different things, but I always end up back in my comfort zone. So right now I'm just putting colors where they go, the lighter values. Okay. And taking my ultramarine blue and mixing it with quinacridone burnt scarlet. I use a lot of quinacridones. Those are sometimes Dale Arouney, sometimes Winsor Newtons, to get back to your question. There's some Holbein on my palette, but it depends on the color itself, not so much the brand. I find you can get good results with inexpensive paint, but you cannot get good results with cheap paper. Cheap paper will fight you tooth and nail. So now I'm just basically painting in a value sketch. Okay. And I did bring my blow dryer just to hasten things a little bit. This is just basically dirty water on my brush here. And it's all going to fade back there. A little bit more purple in there. Add some here. Still just basically tinted water. Okay, painting through a lot of stuff, getting my basic big shapes done. Okay, now I don't know what the blow dryer is going to do to the microphone, but we're going to find out. Okay. Should I cover it or? And that's my first wash here. You may have noticed I'm using the back of my hand to test it because if it's still cool, it's still wet. So now we're going to build up to the next level, keeping in mind the shapes and the dimensions and where the light is hitting. So I'm going to take more of the ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. I'm going to go a little more blue. And the more pigment you use, the darker the color goes. Side, skewing the color. Get the shapes in. Now there's nothing more boring than one solid, sameness. So you need some variety and some change. Add a little of the quinacridone burnt scarlet.
What do you mean by skewer?
I skew the color one way or the other. Mix the balance so they're not equal parts. I'll make it heavier to the blue or heavier to the red, whichever colors I'm mixing. Just get those colors in there. And we're starting to see some shapes. Big shapes coming through. That was supposed to be white. I didn't put an X. Okay. And then mix in the ultramarine blue, a little more pigment, and the quinacridone gold over here. Just, let's get that in there, because there's a tree right there. Okay. Let's come over here and build up over here a little more. We have a fence here, but that fence is going to get done negatively. It's not important to the design, so I'm not too worried about it being so pristine. I want a darker green, so I can use quinacridone burnt orange or copper kettle and ultramarine blue. So make some nice deep green. Skewing the color, adding more of the blue. Just pull that color down. And then take ultramarine blue, quinacridone burnt scarlet. See a pattern here? Favorite colors that are my go-tos all the time. Not being too crazy about details.
Do you always paint on an angle?
No, it depends. This is actually not how, it's close to how I usually paint at home, but it usually depends on how I feel that day or what I'm painting. Sometimes I will paint flat. Sometimes I will paint on a standing easel. It all depends on the treatment that I'm doing. Okay. And how I feel. Okay, let's soften that a little bit. Okay, let's dry this up a bit. I try not to use the blow dryer too much because I prefer to let the watercolor dry on its own and do its own playing. You find out which colors play nicely together and which ones fight, which is kind of fun. But in the interest of time, I'm using the blow dryer today. So now I'm going to start putting in some shadows. And this is ultramarine blue and quinacridone burnt scarlet. And we've got a shadow here, shadow here.
Marianne, is your favorite brush that you don't have that you would have used, is that a flat or a round?
It's a flat. It's a flat, and it's 2 inches wide.
Oh, it's two?
Yes,
Okay.
2 inches wide. This is one of my favorite brushes.
Yeah.
1 inch
And
flat.
who's the manufacturer on that brush?
This is a Simmons Sapphire. I recommend Simmons, any Simmons brushes. Simmons, Simply Simmons are very inexpensive brushes. In fact, I have one here. If anybody wants to see it later on. They have pearl handles and they're very inexpensive, but they're great brushes. These are a step up, a little more expensive, but they're wonderful brushes. They hold their I've used this one for years. They just hold their shape and they feel good in your hand. Okay, and a little darker here. Okay. Right here. Let's see. Check my value sketch, and let's go more into these people. Okay. Yes, do I normally paint like this? Sometimes I paint like this again. Tomorrow morning, I'll be painting this standing up. Some of you will see me. Let's get a little more character in there. Let's go with a smaller brush. Let's take an 8 round. Now these are the the only two brushes that you really have to have. A 1 inch flat and a number 8 round. Okay, let's get rid of some of that water there. You can paint anything and everything with these two brushes. Okay. Now the people.
Now you tell us.
Just do that.
Actually, put your palette in front of the camera for a minute. It's amazing you get so much out of that tiny little palette also.
Yeah. It's, I've gone through different palettes, so many different palettes. I've gone through the John Pike. Thank you. Good. This is what I needed. Okay. So we're practically at in between stages 2 and 3 now. Now try not to too much go to my original reference because you can get tied up in details, and you don't want to get tied up in details yet. That's a different story. If you want to do in your focal area, do more details there, yes, you can do more details. And if I do that, then I would, you'll see in some of my other paintings on the side here, that I will do the detail first. I will do those highly detailed areas first, just my focal point. And then the rest will be much more impressionistic. So let's do this light post. We'll put the top of it in. Just water. Pull this color down. Let's get some alizarin. Put a bit of alizarin in there because it seems to play nicely with that. This comes down. Quinacridone burnt orange.
Are most of those colors Kodam?
The quinacridones, I used to use a lot of quinacridones. They're nice, full-bodied colors, bright colors. They're not granular. A lot of times they're dyeing colors, so when you put them down, you can never scrub back to white. They're clear, they're intense, very versatile. They mix well with other colors. They seem to be a lot of fun. Straight as possible. Okay. And I don't want one full line the same color. Add some alizarin. And let it disappear down there. Okay. A little too dark, so I can just blot a little bit. While it's still wet, smooth it out. Come over here and get George Washington in. Now he's a bas relief, I'm talking about this area here, there's a bas relief of George Washington there, and the painting is not about George Washington being there, it's just getting some shapes in to indicate that something's there. Put some marks in and then soften. Okay. Now these people, some ultramarine blue, and make my, what I call, carrot people. And attach them to the ground right away. Nope, too purple. They're all backlit. Ultramarine blue and quinacridone burnt scarlet seem to be the colors that I go to when I do a lot of shadows. So I'm just going to add that in. Let that go. That there. Okay, then we have another person here. Let's give him cobalt blue. And I'm just mixing right into the other colors I have here because they're all backlit, so none of these colors are really very bright. Get the character of the shape of the person in. Attach them to the ground. The gentleman right here is looking at his cell phone. Cobalt blue and quinacridone burnt scarlet. And then I'm taking cobalt blue and mixing it with the burnt sienna. Before I was using ultramarine blue. I'm getting almost black colors. Okay. Change the color.
I'm approaching the bench, Your Honor.
Yes.
Say when.
Connect him to the ground. And these people in the background are more washed out, so I'm using more water. These people here. Use some ultramarine blue. Let's mix in some of the orange. Quinacridone burnt orange. More water, less pigment, and just put the shape of the people in. Change the color a little bit. These carrot.
Are those your carrot people?
Yes, these carrot people. I learned how to do this a la Bob Wade, very well-known Australian artist. He calls them Bob's Blobs when he does a crowd. Some of you have seen me do it. You do a bunch of people, bunch of shapes, and then you just put their heads on, and you've got a crowd. So, try it. Okay, now we've got someone over here that's, we're going to give her a little bit of a brighter, and it's more the shape of the person. She's got blonde hair. We use quinacridone burnt sienna. And then let the colors start at the top of the people and then let the colors flow down. Nice dark color for the bottom half of her. And attach her to the ground. Okay. And let's get this guy going. He's got dark hair. Start with blue. Add some quinacridone burnt orange. He's got a backpack on. And then the pants, we're going to add more blue. You just start at the top and work your way down. While he's still wet, you get that foot to meld into the shadow. Attaches them to the ground. That backpack, we're going more of the orange. Now I take the quinacridone burnt scarlet, and this seems to work very well for faces in the dark areas. Oops, I just got some paint on my finger. Okay, and let that color just blend down. Give them some hair. Is there any questions?
Could you just pick up what you're getting your demonstration from the picture for a short peek? There you go.
Okay.
What are you gonna do with this sky?
I may leave it white. I may just leave it white. We'll see at the end whether it really needs color or not. Okay, just mixing up some colors that are still on my palette here. Let's give this guy some dark hair. Okay. And the quinacridone burnt scarlet. Squeeze out some water from my brush. Give him a hand there. Let this color flow down into him. Okay. Where are we going to go now? Okay, so now we'll dry it. I think this is a little too dark here. So at this point, I can still pick it up, wet it. Just let some of that color dissipate. Use my bigger brush, less strokes the better. And let that color melt. Okay. Soften it a little bit. Okay. Now the idea in the beginning, you pick what you want to be white, and you can pick more than you think you want to be white, because it's much easier to knock those whites down later on than to bring them back to life. So I left more whites now, and now I'm knocking them down. Okay. So we have a nice shadow here from this arch, part of the arch. So I'm going to take all the colors that I've used. That's the ultramarine blue, quinacridone burnt scarlet, a little more blue. And then over here I have the ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna. And let's kind of mix them together. Splattered all over. Okay. Get this shadow in. Bring it up onto the arch. Still becomes part of it. Soften that edge. Okay. Change the color. Drop it in there. Add some alizarin, just drop it in there. Ultramarine blue. Let them melt together, okay? So there we go for that. Let's dry this a bit. Okay, at this point, those of you that have seen me paint before, what would I usually say?
Step back.
Step back. You can't see what you're painting when you're standing on top of it. So you have to step back in the middle to see if you're making a mess or if you got something to salvage. Okay, so I've got my mood, it's coming through, and my light. So there's still a little more that I can do to this to really bring it home. Okay.
That lamppost really lightened a lot from when you put it down.
Yes,
It was
yes.
very dark.
Yeah, well, the paint, watercolor paint, transparent watercolor paint will always lighten at least 10% once you put it down. So you put it down a little darker than you think you want it, and then it will dry lighter.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
What would you say the focus of this is? If you could put your finger on the focus. Okay, good.
That area. Okay, is it working?
Absolutely.
Okay, okay. That was what I was working towards in my value sketches.
Question for you.
Okay?
Is this your usual pace, or you're just speeding it up a little bit because of us here?
I'm speeding it up for the sake of, that's what the blow dryer and the time
Thank
limit.
you.
Okay.
And you always talk to yourself while you're doing it.
Oh, I talk to myself all the time. Constantly, constantly. Half the time my husband says, wait a minute, were you talking to me or, no.
That's the same thing.
Talking to me, yep.
That's fine.
I'm my best audience, so.
Yeah. That's good. Good thing.
Okay. Okay, so you get the answers you want, you try and work things out. Okay, so I need a little more punch in here, okay, to show that those are two different planes. So I'm going to take the ultramarine blue and quinacridone burnt scarlet. Just give myself a little more dark there. Okay, water. Okay. Now, one of the most fun things that I like about watercolor is when you try and do bounced light. Take some nickel azo yellow. I had to think first. Just put a touch of that in there. This is one of those colors that is a bully. You put it out there and it pushes everything else out of the way. So it shows up and pops sometimes. When you look at this later on, you'll see how it looks like the light is bouncing off of that in there. So now, one of the biggest rules in watercolors, you don't use one color in one place. So I'm just going to add it around it a little bit.
What was the name of the color?
Nickel azo yellow.
What company? Azo.
That is a Daniel Smith. Okay, just taking some palette scraps.
Quinacridone colors, Daniel Smith too?
Some of them are Winsor Newton.
Azo.
Okay.
AC.
AZO. Nickel, Nickel, azo, yellow. Getting in the character of this post here. Trying to do it straight. All this little calligraphy and just getting the character of it in there. And it's impressionist, so it's not photographic. So I can just take a wet brush. Now, this is a technical term. I smush it around. Just to give it the impression of what it is. Okay? Was that ugh or was Okay, so we need a little more in here. So let's just take some watery colors that I have on my palette. Just add a little stuff. John Jameson, when you see a muddle, paint a muddle. That means you do not have to be photorealistic to put an impression in someone's head.
You said John.
John Jameson.
That's my father's name.
He was a very well-known British artist.
Okay.
Wonderful artist. Look him up. Fabulous, fabulous stuff. Okay. Now, what else do I need? Let's work on this area here with the tree. Now, I still have, you see the damascoid in there, so I can be a little freer. I'm going to mix quinacridone burnt orange and let's use some phthalo blue. I use phthalo blue quite a lot when I do skies. It seems to give the best color for skies. Ultramarine blue is a no-no. In skies, it's too granular. Now, I am using, squeeze the water out of my brush, I am using the side of the brush to get some texture. A little more of the blue. Now I keep looking, instead of looking at my reference, I'm looking at my value sketch, my last value sketch. Okay. Add some water. Let these colors, the bushes, continue out to the side. Okay. Clean that edge up a bit. Okay. More right in there, around his head. Okay. Back. Okay. A little more of the ultramarine blue. Phthalo, thank you. And the orange. Let's get this more in here.
So you're using a phthalo blue and orange?
Phthalo blue and quinacridone burnt orange or copper kettle. Okay.
And did you decide on these colors based on your experience or?
I am a big proponent of knowing your colors. Whatever colors you have on your palette, you have to know what they can do with each other. You make your own color charts. Anytime I add one color to my palette, it changes everything. So it will change the greens you get, the reds you get, the yellows you get, the purples, everything. So you have to know what you can get out of the colors on your palette. You have to see how they're going to play nicely with each other or how they're going to repel each other and show different granular qualities. So through experience and knowing my palette, I mix. You won't get the same color by mixing a different brand either. So if I mix ultramarine blue, Winsor Newton ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna Winsor Newton, I will get one result. If you use a different brand of those colors, you will not get the same result. It won't be anything close to it. So let's go. Let's get this a little dark, just a little bit more character here. Okay. Okay. What else does it need? Background, it needs a little more punch. Can you see what I have here? Okay, so it does need a little more punch. So let's add a little bit of color. We darken the buildings or you want the sky?
I would say building.
Okay. Now we have to keep in mind the planes of the building. The side away from the sun will be darker. Everything is backlit. Take more of the same colors that I've been using. And build on that. Now what I'm doing here is glazing technique. What's underneath is dry. So now what I use over it, if I use a color that doesn't work well with it, it'll get muddy. So in knowing my colors, I know what colors I can use over that so I won't get mud. A little more back here. Change color as I go. A little more water to spread it, because they are still fading into the background. Okay. Dark color. Add to this right here, the top of that lamp. Side of that. Darker. Give that some shape. Okay, the buildings are better?
Yes.
Okay, so we need a little more in here. Okay. Let's put some people back here. Okay, we'll do some Bob's Blobs. Taking some, not a lot of pigment, sharpening my brush as I go. Put in the shapes. The people yet? Almost.
What'd you call them?
Bob's Blobs. Bob Wade.
Oh.
Okay, now those are bodies, and I've got, okay, let's get a little more over here. Take some ultramarine blue, quinacridone burnt scarlet, whatever that puddle was, mix it in, sharpen my brush, squeeze water out. And when I squeeze the water, I'm not squeezing with the other hand and pulling. You never, 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 never pull a brush. You will ruin more brushes than you'll ever own. They ruin them real fast. Just getting some little bit of detail in there. Okay. And a little more. Now step back again. Let's see what I've got. Okay, where do I go from here?
I think you need a little bit of punch of green on the bushes by the lamp on the left side.
Okay. That's exactly what I was thinking too. Okay. All right. to even it out, because there's a bright, bright green over here. Okay, we're going to add some more green here, and that's the ultramarine blue and the quinacridone orange. Now, a lot of times we've been taught to, if you're going to use a color a lot, mix up a big puddle of it. I rarely do that because I feel it gives it much more interest if you keep mixing it up. If it's the same two colors, if you keep mixing it up and you get a little different variety each time. A lot more interest for the eye. Okay. Those negative spaces. Okay. Now I can go a little further with this. How much time do we have left? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we'll make him a little more visible. That's the orange. Just get that foot there. And disappear into the shadow. Okay. Ultramarine blue and quinacridone burnt scarlet. Just a little bit more detail. Little tiny pieces now. Using another tool, my finger. Okay. I think we're just about there. And darken up a little bit in there.
I don't want to interrupt you, but maybe you would share who some of your favorite teachers
Oh.
influence on.
Okay, well, my very favorite teachers are the students that I work with. Absolutely. I learn a lot by teaching, and I learn a lot from just from seeing them work. You guys. I've worked with Alvaro Castanet, who was invaluable. A lot of fun. I worked with Charles Reed, who was fantastic doing portraits and color. I've worked with Mel Stabin. He was one of my first teachers outside of school. Don Andrews was fabulous. He was a wonderful teacher. Okay, the one theme color that I see running through all my work is purple. Okay. And something happens to me when I see green with no purple in it. Because then when I see purple go into it, look what happens. It just makes the green sing.
So you're putting purple,
Yep.
but that's a mixed purple.
This is not a mixed purple. This is dioxazine. This is Windsor purple.
Okay.
Add some of the gold to that. Just a wet brush, soften that a bit. And let's get rid of that there. Okay, purple. Some splatters.
Are we allowed to suggest something?
Absolutely.
If you don't mind, I think the third person on the left's head is a little too small.
This one?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't give him hair. Okay.
That's so much better. I hope that's okay.
That's fine,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you. That was the only.
See, I learned from my students.
That was the only thing that needed.
Okay. We can get rid of that white right there, because it's,
You still have masking?
Yes, there's still masking on here. Okay. There was a white there that was distracting, pulling my eye out of the painting, so I got rid of that. And I've got some nice colors melding through everything. There may be something that if I walk away now, if I come back to it later, I may decide to do. So I do this little trick where I stand my paintings in my living room that I go in and out of all the time, and every time I walk in, it's in a place where it's the first place I look, and sometimes you look at it and you go, oh, it's done, and sometimes you say, oh, I need this here and I need this here, and then you go right back to the drawing board and then you finish your painting. So we'll dry this up. And I want to make sure I get this good and dry because I'm going to remove that masket that I put down. Okay. So now the one thing I forgot was the rubber cement pickup. So I'm removing with my finger. I have an eraser that I'm going to try. Still a little too wet there. Okay. Make sure my finger's clean. Take this off, because a lot of times the maskoid leaves too hard of an edge.
So what do you do?
Soften it up. Soften it. I'm going to go in and soften up a little bit of this. Take it off. Sorry?
What do you do with the skin that you rub off?
The skin that I rub off, it's just coming, flaking off and rubbing off into a sticky ball, and I make sure it comes off the painting. Oh, John Salmon was another one I took workshops with too, which was wonderful. He told
If you did paint the sky at all, what would you do?
I would just give it a light wash. A light wash. It kind of adds to the brightness of the day and the time of day that I left it white. But you still can put we can put a little,
You said no ultramarine blue though. So
Not in the
what
sky.
color would you use?
I would use Phthalo Blue. But right now, what do we do? I put people back here, and I had maskoid there, so I have to fix that. Fix some of the, where I had the maskoid. Okay. And soften right here. Just taking a wet brush, and what I'm doing is, the paper has nooks and crannies, like an English muffin. And if I take my brush and push it into the nooks and crannies, it will disturb where the pigment has settled. So I just kind of push it and soften. It softens that edge. In some places I want to leave it because that was the character of the light that day. And that's what captivated me. I was actually stopped at a red light and took this picture. Wow, I gotta paint that, so. But very few pictures that I take get painted exactly as they are. You have to do some editing and revision to make it the way you want it. So, and he needs to melt into the shadow here. Okay.
Looks like two ears.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay, should we keep them?
It's a fox.
I actually like it.
We'll enhance him. There we go. Okay. So, I think it's finished. I may, I might come back later on. Sorry?
You didn't sign?
No, I don't have a mat. Oh, didn't sign it, that's right. Okay, so we'll sign it. Pen, okay, and there we go. Thank you. Thank you for being a wonderful audience.